Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. As always, I cannot wait to introduce our guest to you. But before I do, there's someone I want to thank that we always thank. We want to thank brassandwinds.com. These are friends of ours that we use whenever we want to recommend musical instruments for our friends, for our students, and for you. Check out brassandwinds.com. You're watching Truer MU. As a performance and confidence coach, I talk to many musicians and professionals in the music world and outside the world about their performance and about their lives as they go about their business, trying to improve in what they do. You'll find a lot of these conversations here on Truer MU. I'm going to talk to one of those people right now, but before I do, there is a story, as there often is. Many of you who subscribe to this channel and watch on regularly have seen our interview with Joe Alterman. This is a friend of mine. I've known him for years, and we've had many conversations on and off the show. Recently, Joe posted an essay about something personal to him that I was amazed to read, something I did not know about him, and I wanted to include it on the show. I asked him if he'd be willing to talk to us, and he was kind enough to agree to come back. Joe, welcome back to our show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's good to see you.
It's great to see you too. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Maybe some people have already figured out what the show's about, but others maybe not. I'd like to start by having you read your essay.
Okay, sure. This is an essay I wrote. It's called Practicing Till It's Perfect. And it's about my experience with obsessive compulsive disorder. So we took our seats just as the bell rang for class to begin. Mr. Harris began passing out the tests, and I immediately felt my heart start to race. That feeling of crippling anxiety took complete hold of me. Sure, high school history wasn't my favorite subject, but I was prepared for this test, and I knew it. My heart sank as I saw it wasn't multiple choice this time. I wouldn't simply be able to fill in the circles and move on to the next question. Knowing each one would have to be answered in multiple sentences, I began to panic as I realized how many shapes I would have to perfect as I crafted each letter to complete each answer. I made it through the first couple of words before I had to write the letter P. I started from the bottom up, first drawing the line and then circling around to form the oval. As I finished drawing, I realized the end of the oval extended past the straight line. Knowing the letter wasn't perfect, I needed to fix it and began to erase and rewrite. I rewrote that letter and had a perfect second P. However, at that time, 3 was my lucky number, so I erased and rewrote it. But the third P wasn't perfect. So logically to me, I now had to successfully erase and rewrite the letter P 9 times. That would be 3 Ps 3 times. There was a lot of pressure to get that final ninth P perfect, or else I would have to multiply those 9 Ps 3 times and do it again. I messed up the ninth P. Finally, after erasing and rewriting it 27 times, I was able to move on to the next letter, an A, 27 more times. The letter after the A was a T, and once again, I had to erase and rewrite that letter 27 times to complete the cycle of writing 3 consecutive letters 27 times. As I got to the fourth letter, I knew if I messed it up, I'd have to begin erasing that one too, thus messing up my pattern of 3. I began to really panic, knowing that if that should happen, I would have to erase and rewrite that letter the next 5 letters 27 times each, which would equal erasing and rewriting 9 consecutive letters 27 times. 25 minutes had already passed, and I had only written a couple of words in this very long test. I began to shake as I felt the tears begin to well up. I decided to step outside for a minute. 2 girls stood in front of me at the water fountain. One had a sip of water and began walking away before quickly turning back. Let me fill up my water bottle real quick, she said. I'm so OCD. As I walked back to the classroom, I knew I couldn't let myself begin to write. I decided I would sit through the test and talk to my teacher afterward. He'd understand. So I sat there for the rest of the class with pencil in hand, pretending to be engaged in the test. As I sat there, I could feel my mind was about to punish me for not being strong enough to continue with the erasing and rewriting. It told me to count. I counted to 80. Again, it said. I counted to 80 again, again. By the time the bell rang, I was noticeably in tears and had to count to 80 55 times. Well, that's enough of that.
Yeah. Thank you very much for reading that to us. For folks that haven't caught on yet, you're describing your OCD at a young age. What's it like for you to read that to us?
It's hard, honestly. I love talking to young people who are dealing with OCD and helping out however I can. But a lot of this stuff I've kind of blocked out, so it's not really an easy experience to go back. but I'm happy to do it because I hope it helps somebody.
Well, I hope it helps somebody too, and I hope our discussion helps too. And for those, I forgot to introduce you to the people who don't know you. Let me go ahead and tell people who you are. Joe Alterman is a jazz pianist who has performed at many world renowned venues, including the Kennedy Center, Lincoln Center, Birdland, and Blue Note. He has played alongside Houston Person, Les McCann, Dick Gregory, and Ramsey Lewis, along with his own trio. He also serves as the executive director for the Narana Concert and Culture Series. Now, I guess it's interesting that I saved the introduction for after the essay. Usually I would read the introduction first, but for people that don't know you, to hear you describe your difficulties writing 3 words and then to hear about how incredibly successful you are as a jazz pianist, that must be an interesting contrast for them. Is it for you an interesting contrast?
Uh, it's all part of the same journey for me. I think, for me, honestly, during that time specifically, that was like early high school for me, and I didn't, a lot of those things that I described was pretty much things that were mental, or you wouldn't really notice unless you really were watching me in depth write that test. So I was able to hide a lot of that from my friends, and I wanted to because I didn't want to not feel normal around them. And so basically, all day was really suffering through school because I was pretty much doing all of my OCD things, but also faking like I was not sick at the time. And so basically, I would come home and run to the piano. And that was like the time in my life when music, I fell in love with the piano. It was like the place where I could always be myself. And so for me, like, I mean, occasionally people will tell me that they feel some feeling in my music or something, and I really think that that would not have happened without this experience. So to me, it's all part of the same journey. When I look back on it now, I'm thankful for the experience. It was kind of a way to strengthen my mind, and it is a weird dichotomy, I guess, but it's really amazing to me to see how far I've been able to come. But it is really, that happened, and then this happened because of that to me.
Well, we'll talk about more about how that happened over the course of the interview. I'm curious to
Yeah.
know when the first time was that you realized that you had something that was different from what other people had.
Mm. Well, it's funny, like it took a while. Growing up Jewish, we have all these traditions. And so for me, like for many years, I just thought that I had traditions. Like that's what I called them. At the time, I'd never heard of OCD. I didn't know it was a thing. I think most people, if not everyone, have obsessive compulsive tendencies. It's only, the disorder is only when it gets in the way of your life. So I think for me, growing up, I had a lot of traditions, and the amount of them, traditions, quote, quote, and the amount of them kept growing. And eventually, it wasn't until I really started counting a lot that it was really starting to bother me. Before, it was just, I'd be a little kid. My dad would come up to tuck me into bed, and I'd ask him to put the door to touch, this wall a certain way. That was just like a comforting thing for me before going to bed. But after I started counting a lot, that's when I knew something. It was really starting to become less of obsessive compulsive tendencies and really the disorder. And I remember at the time I had no idea of the word OCD, and I remember looking around on the bus like, is everyone else counting? And once it occurred to me that everyone else was not counting, that's when I realized something was up, and it was really bothering me. And I remember going on line. I was like eighth or ninth grade, and I typed in all my symptoms, and then the word OCD came up, and I was immediately, or obsessive compulsive disorder, and immediately I thought, that's me.
Yeah.
It took a while, it took years.
Well, help me separate out this idea of OCD tendencies versus disorder. I'd like to share with you a few odd things about myself that happened when I was young that you may
Yeah.
find some sympathy with. First of all, I remember there was a period of time in probably around when I was 10 or 11 that if I turned off the radio before the song was over, I was in trouble because then I would have to hum the end of the song for an hour after that, especially if there was a cadence that hadn't come clear, the 5 to the 1. I would have to hum
Mm,
that 5-1 again and again. I got in trouble in school. They said, "Who is humming out there?" Because it was,
mm.
when I was younger, my grandmother told me that if I was tense, I could unwind by turning around in a circle. And I extrapolated from that anytime I needed to unwind or relax, I should turn around in a circle. And that got me in this thing where I would turn in circles again and again until I
Mm.
really felt better. And I would never feel better, and I would just keep turning around. Is this
Yeah.
OCD or is this what was happening to me?
Well, I mean, it definitely, I can relate to that being, you're definitely responding to a compulsion. But the question to me, for me, would be, did it how much did it bother you? Because like for example, I know someone who goes to the gym like 3 times a day, and someone would say, "Man, he is to me like the most OCD person I know," but he loves doing that, so he can't really call it OCD because it doesn't bother him. So if it
Yeah.
bothered you, then yes, I would say it's OCD. If not, I think it's obsessive compulsive. It's definitely along
Obsessive
the
and
lines of
compulsive. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I mean to me like OCD is either like do this, or if you don't do this, then this will happen. So you were definitely experiencing something like that. It's just how much was it, disrupting your life? That's
Right.
the yeah.
And
But I'm
it,
not a doctor.
no, well, that's fine. And it went away. This isn't something that
Mhm.
continued when I was 14, 15. I did have other problems, but those particular problems seem to have gone away. My compulsiveness, or maybe I channeled
Mhm.
them into something else. I'm not sure. Uh,
Yeah.
but let's talk about you. You said you went to the piano. Did you not have to play the same note 50 times? Did something different happen at the piano?
Um, no, there were a few times when I did have to do stuff like that, and I remember that was rough. But mostly, I would just go up and just play, like not even like a song. I would just kind of just that's kind of how I got into improvising, I guess, because it was like, how do you feel? Play how you feel, and I might just be on like a minor chord for an hour, but
Yeah.
yeah, but no, it did affect my practicing at some points. But I was lucky that for the most part, I could it was mostly just an emotional outlet for me to get out how I'm feeling.
Oh, that's interesting. And the
Yeah,
improvisation part is very interesting too. Did you study classical piano as well?
I did, but I was always getting in trouble for changing notes. So I
Yeah. And
didn't know that was improvising at the time.
you got in trouble for changing them. Did you consider yourself in trouble? Did you find yourself obsessing or compulsing about the piece you were working on?
um, Not at the time, but I've dealt with that with pieces that I've worked on before for sure. And
Yeah.
it's not just about classical pieces; it's just certain concepts and certain things that you practice, and doing them a lot. And yeah, I can
But
relate to that.
according to your definition of the disorder, it sounds like at the piano it wasn't interfering in your life. Like the piano seems to be a very different experience for you.
Yeah, but the piano was more of a outlet for me when OCD was ruining my life or disrupting my life. So, OCD was a part of, I might be playing the piano and be counting in my head. So at the same time that I'm playing, I would be doing some OCD things, but it wasn't usually taken out on the piano. So
Yeah.
it's not like I was free during the times I was at the piano. The piano was just, an outlet for me.
Yeah, yeah, and an outlet that
Mhm.
worked. So it actually made
Right.
use of your OCD rather than making a problem for your OCD to solve.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of, I don't know if it it gave me a reason to the piano became a reason, and OCD gave me a reason to have to let out emotions and get something out emotionally.
Uh-huh.
So the piano luckily was there.
But the counting
Yeah.
aspect, counting is vital in piano playing, especially at the level you play. So, did it help to have something to count while you were busy getting your emotions out? Like, I'm taking care of this over here so that I can do that.
No, it was separate. It
Oh, okay.
was yeah, I mean it was like count to 80 times while you're playing the piano. So it'd be like unrelated really.
But
It
so it
was.
was still happening. You were still thinking count to 80 times while you were playing the piano.
I mean, that happened before. Yeah,
Yeah,
it wasn't every time I sat down, and I don't remember every time I sat down. But
sure.
all I'm saying is that I was not free from OCD when I sat down at the piano. It
And that's
was a helpful thing to have in my life, but it didn't. It was the best thing in my life at that time, and I wouldn't be where I am now without both the piano and without having OCD. Um, yeah,
oh, can you explain that?
well, I did. It's about when people tell me that my music has feeling. I think that I only have feeling in my music because of that experience of
Mhm.
sitting at the piano and just letting it all out every day for many hours a day for many years. So I think that it became like what I said, like the place where I could always be myself. And I think some people hear that,
Now I
and I really
understand.
credit that to OCD. Yeah.
Okay, now I'm understanding. So, in other words, the OCD created a great need in you, and through expressing your expressing yourself through that need, you became a compelling performer, and it also was an enjoyable experience for you.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, great.
I can't say it better than that. Yes.
Well, what about stage fright? Do you have stage fright?
No.
Okay, that's great.
I don't.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, I get anxious, but not about being in front of people. It's more about how's this performance going to go.
right, right. No, when
Hmm.
I'm in the same boat now. Generally, I manage my anxiety just fine. But for many, many years, my stage fright was debilitating and prevented me from being able to perform at my level. That's not the
Mm.
case for you ever.
Um, no, not really. I mean, I've been real. I deal with anxiety, and I have things that I like to do before shows, and um, but yeah, I don't. Stage fright's not really something that affects me in a negative way. But I do feel, Ramsey Lewis used to call it professional anticipation. I feel that, but it's not really about the fact that I'm going to be in front of people.
Yeah, got you.
Hmm. Yeah.
What about jazz in particular? I think we talked about this in your other interview somewhat, but uh, was it the improvisatory aspect of jazz that attracted you in this situation, or was it something else about jazz, or both?
Well, I think listening to jazz at this time in my life, I really like. I guess there was two kinds of jazz that I really liked listening to. One was very peaceful jazz, like when I'd get into bed, I'd put on some Nat King Cole or some Sonny Rollins or whatever. But then I also like during the day, I would be just blaring Charles Mingus. Like I love that cacophony. I feel like there was a lot in his music that I felt like I was going through and could really, I feel like a lot of my life at that time felt like a lot of Mingus's wild music. But honestly, I didn't get into jazz originally because of the solos. I really got into jazz because of the way the jazz people were interpreting melodies that I already knew. To me, I think something that probably initially attracted me to jazz was I grew up hearing a lot of like doo-wop music and stuff, and I love that. That sound is really comforting to me, and I think a lot of the chords in doo-wop music are pretty similar. So I think there was some sort of bridge between the more sophisticated or whatever jazz music to my childhood music. So I think there's something there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's
Mm.
interesting. Well, what about improvement? Have you found improvement in your OCD since you were young?
Yes. No. So I did something called cognitive behavior therapy, and basically that's the way I would explain that is it's like if you're afraid of heights, you're just going to have to go to the top of a tall building until you're not afraid anymore. So I had a doctor who uh, understood my routine. And after she understood it, she would come to my house almost every day or a few times a week and mess with my schedule. She would take the shampoo and say, you have 3 minutes to take a shower, things like that. And it was a very difficult thing, but I got it. And the way I always talk about OCD to people who are really suffering, well, there's two things. Is one, you are not OCD. OCD is an experience you're going through right now. I think that's important for people to know. And also, I started to see OCD, knowing that it's not me, as something that was kind of living inside of me. So the only way to kill that thing was to do cognitive behavioral therapy because the less you listen to it, the smaller it gets. And so basically, I wouldn't say that OCD does not affect me on a daily basis. Anxiety does, but OCD right now, because of my experience with cognitive behavior therapy, it is so small in me that most of the time when it tells me to do something, I can just say, shut up, and it'll go away.
So,
But to me, yeah, it's a skill.
yeah, you've got a
Cognitive
new
behavior
skill set,
therapy.
in other words, that you didn't have before.
Totally. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Very thankful for that.
That's terrific. Well,
Yeah.
talk to me about how you practice. I'm just very curious. And does OCD play a role at all in your practicing now?
I don't think OCD plays a role in how I practice, and every practice session for me is different. I mean, I always warm up with some scales and arpeggios and some chord things, and I always like to go through. one real book or one book a day just to play all the songs and see what comes to mind with chord, stuff. But I also practice reading and different concepts, and you know, it's hard to explain because it's always different, or not always different, but it's often different. But I have a lot to work on, and I'm working on it.
You say you go through a whole real book in one practice session every day?
Pretty much, yeah. I
That's
love just going through.
that's a lot. It's extraordinary. It's like 500 pages.
It's a lot, yeah. I mean, I don't always play every song, but
Oh,
I'll
I
go
see. Just
through.
go
I'll
through
pick
them.
like a book. Yeah, I mean, I'll often play every song and challenge myself to medley through it. But at night, it's the most fun thing to challenge myself to medley through, and how do you segue from this song to the next song, things like that. It's and then thinking of alternate chords to play under. It's everything to me.
Yeah.
Like just exploring these songs and how to interpret them.
I am going to be seeing the performer Adam Ant in a few months, and I'm real excited about that. I did a deep dive into
Nice.
Adam Ant. Now, he's got a separate issue. He's bipolar. And what I
Mm,
learned from watching about his life was that his bipolar helped him and it brought him down both. When he
mhm,
was in his manic stage, it gave him all kinds of energy and he was just going, going, going. And it really contributed in some ways to his success because every night he had a whole list of 50 things to do and he was going to do them and he did them. And he,
mhm,
became a very successful. But the depressive side brought him down, it took him out. But what was interesting to me was that there was something useful about his bipolar at all, that it
mhm.
wasn't entirely a problem, it was only partially a problem. Was your OCD, did it provide you with any superpowers or any skills that you wouldn't have had if you hadn't had OCD that might have helped you in your business?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, well, for one, it gave my music feeling.
Right, right.
It taught me how to express my feelings. I learned this concept of cognitive behavior therapy, which I'm in a lot of tricky situations and difficult, but I'm always able to remind myself that nothing is harder than that. So it makes other things feel easier. Also, I mentioned Sonny Rollins earlier. His music was very helpful for me during this time, and I he had a guest book on his website, and I wrote him a note and I just thanked him for helping me through a difficult time. And he wrote me back and he said something like, "Dear Joe, thank you for your words. We all have to use an opportunity or adversity as an opportunity to find our way forward. Like all of us here in this life have to struggle, so keep your mind strong throughout this short existence." So to me, that's become kind of like a motto. I think it gave me an opportunity to strengthen my mind at a young age, which was huge, so yeah, I mean, truthfully, like if I could redo everything, I mean, I would hope it wouldn't be quite as debilitating as it was, but I wouldn't relive life without it because I'm very proud of who I am and very happy. And I don't think I would feel the same way had I not been through that experience. It's kind of given a lot of meaning to my life.
Yeah. And one of your, if you'll pardon my using the term superpowers, is that you're
Mm,
extraordinarily organized when it comes to making contact with and maintaining contact with other musicians, among them people who are famous. You count among your list of friends a number of famous people, jazz musicians, and you've maintained good relations with them. This is not
mhm,
something that of course, your talent plays into it. Of course, they're attracted to your talent, and because you're a top-notch player. But there's lots of top-notch players, and they don't do what you do. Is OCD at all a part of this in terms of being able to or wanting to reach out and stay in touch?
I don't think OCD plays into that, but I think OCD has contributed to the energy or vibe I put out there that these people like.
Yeah, yeah.
Just having gone through that, I think, yeah, it's all everything that I've been through has made me who I am now, and if they like me, it has something to do with that experience, I think.
Well,
But I'm not OCD in terms of like I need to reach out to so and so today, and in an OCD kind of way. Yeah, yeah,
well, good because I think that can make it hard. People don't always like
yeah, yeah,
that.
definitely. Sure.
Well, I want to thank you very much for your candor and your willingness to talk to us. If there are people out there with OCD, what would you like to say to them?
Well, again, remember that OCD is not you. It's an experience that you're going through, and I would want to encourage people to meditate. I think being able to me, that's been a helpful thing too. When you can you can really only think about one thing at a time. So if you're focused on your breath, you're not thinking about your OCD. It's hard to do, but that's been a big thing for me. And feel free to reach out. I mean, I'm very accessible. I'm here to help.
Okay, well then tell folks how you'd like them to reach you, please.
Yeah, well, my email is just joe.alterman@gmail.com. So send me a note and we can talk.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Joe, thank
Yeah,
you very much for being with us today.
thanks for having me. It's always good to talk to you.
Likewise. And thank you, audience, for tuning in. We really appreciate you continuing to check out these interviews. There's lots of others, including the other interview with Joe, which you'll find in the comments. If you have any questions for me, please feel free to reach out to us. And if there's someone you'd like to see on this program, please let me know. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.